It's 790 KABC Change Reaction Radio and the Change Reaction Radio podcast. What is it? Well, we're about to spend the next hour meeting people, sharing stories that are about generosity and kindness. So if that's the kind of mental palate cleanser you could use right now, you're definitely in the right place, and we're happy that you're here. Yeah, I'm Matt West. I'm your host, the executive producer with Change Reaction. With me is my co-host, the beautiful Christina Pascucci, KTLA, Fox News. Good to see you for another round of stories.
So good to be here. This is just what the doctor ordered. I mean, with like everything happening in the world, this is where you can come and kind of have a reprieve from it all.
Maybe feel a little bit better about what's going on in the world around you. Just by sharing stories of people doing amazing things. One of those people doing amazing things is with us as almost our third host of the show today.
Yes.
You've probably heard him in some of the stories that we shared in our previous episode. If you've started following us on social media, you've definitely seen him. He's the president of the Change Reaction. It's Wade Trimmer. Hey, buddy.
Great to be here.
Woo.
Really stoked to have you, man. Now, on our first show, we had Greg Perlman, who's the founder of the Change Reaction, telling us about really his inspiration and his vision and everything that he's been trying to do with the Change Reaction since it was born. But I'd really like to spend a little bit of time today just kind of understanding how you fit into the whole puzzle picture of what is this mosaic of the Change Reaction. The organization's been around for 5 years. How long have you been with the Change Reaction? Let's start there.
It's actually been around for almost 6.
Okay.
And I've been there for coming up on 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really kind of got the thing off the ground with Greg?
Yeah. So Greg and I actually met about 12 years ago. And we met because the organization that I was running at the time had this massive fire. And it was a family shelter that burned down. And thankfully, everybody was safe. And I met Greg's family through that, and we really started a friendship. And I think the second meeting we had, we looked at each other and said, "We're going to work together someday." And it took a little while, but through that friendship and that relationship, it was as Greg's desire to give became greater, we would spend more and more time together. And then it really just came down to him calling me one day and saying, "Would you do this full time with me?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? This is a dream."
Yes.
Easy, yes. Let's get things done. And that's what we've been doing.
Tell me a little bit about your background before you met with Greg and before you started building the Change Reaction with him. Because you mentioned you were working for an organization, so you've been in the giving space for a while. I know you have a bit of a history working with at-risk youth. I'd love to know a little bit about your story in all this.
Thank you. My life changed when I met a young girl in Westwood, and the way that happened, it's actually kind of a funny story. My roommate had a crush on a mutual friend of ours, and he asked she wouldn't go out with him unless I was wingman. The only time in my life I've ever played wingman. And so I agreed. I said, sure, yeah. And we're in Westwood waiting for a movie, and they're flirting, doing their thing, and I'm sort of like, why am I here? And I look across the square, and this little girl locks eyes with me.
How old was this girl?
I found out she was 12.
Okay.
So she walked right up to me, singled me out in a crowd, and she said, "Hey, mister, can you get me some food?"
Aww.
And I had just moved to L.A., and so I was confused. I said, well, why do you need food? And she said, "I'm homeless." And I looked at her and I said, "How old are you?" And she said, "I'm 12. And I said, "I don't understand how you sleep on the streets?" And she said, "Yeah, that's what I've been doing the past 8 months." And I said, "Okay, let's go. I need to hear your story." And so I said goodbye to my friends. I took her out for a piece of pizza. We sat outside at this little cafe in Westwood, and she shared her story with me. And then she told me, there are hundreds of kids like me on the streets of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like hearing about cancer for the first time, or something that you've never heard of, and being so shocked by it. And I was just overwhelmed and heartbroken. I thought, how can all these little kids be running the streets?
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to kill time with her because I was trying to figure out how am I going to help this little girl.
And how do I not send her back to the streets tonight?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. I was thinking, do I bring her into, like, do I take her home? That's not really going to work with 3 adult roommates, right? All men. And she finally looked at me and said, hey, I need to get going. I need to find a place to stay tonight. And I said, how are you going to do that? And she said, you don't want to know.
Oh, gosh.
And
brutal.
And
Makes
I
me
just,
sick.
and so I won't go into it, but she told me how she was going to do that. And then I gave her a hug and she walked into the night. And I sat in the middle of Westwood Square just bawling my eyes out as I was watching her walk away, thinking, I don't know what to do for this little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, we went home. I couldn't stay in my condo that night. I literally just sat up in a park and just stayed awake all night and having, essentially a conversation with God saying, what am I going to do? Now that I'm aware of this, what am I going to do? And that changed the course of my life. This little girl literally changed the course of my life.
What
And
a
what
story.
were you doing up to that point?
So I was trained in architecture. I'd moved to LA to continue that pursuit. It was in the early 90s. There's a deep recession.
Sure.
And so architects were a dime a dozen. Nobody was hiring. And so I was sort of like, I've been pursuing my dream, but there's nothing for me,
Right.
And so I feel like my calling found me through this little girl.
Unbelievable.
Wow, it just ignited a flame within you, and you never looked back. I mean, that's one of the issues you care most about, right, is tackling homelessness.
I mean, I spent most of my career working on tackling homelessness. And, I wasn't a trained social worker. And so I started volunteering in Hollywood, meeting these young people, being blown away by their stories. And they trained me. So they literally were the ones that trained me, these young people. And I would just ask questions like, so you use heroin, what does that do for you? And they would talk to me about what that feels like. And then it was about the trauma they were carrying. And started to understand, okay, addiction is what happens when people are looking for a solution to their problem or to their trauma. And then the addiction becomes a problem. I mean, then that substance or whatever they're using becomes the problem. And so it sort of broke that whole idea of addiction being a moral issue. It's not a moral issue. People are trying to treat themselves, and then it becomes a problem. So these young people just teach me things like that, and that's what I bring into my work, is that experience on the front lines.
Well, it says a lot about you. I mean, the fact that you're, one, so curious, that you asked questions, and brave to be willing to ask questions like that, but also provided that, because for them to feel safe answering you, it takes a certain type of person and approach. So I think that says a lot. What do you see, based on all the work you've done, as the biggest contributor to homelessness, and perhaps what the biggest solution could be, which I know is $1 million question as everyone's trying to tackle
Or
that.
$1 billion question. if
Yeah,
you've been paying attention.
multi-billion dollar.
Yeah, sure.
Then it hasn't been solved.
So money's not the answer.
Money has not been the answer because we've spent tens of billions of dollars on it.
Yeah.
And I think what's important to understand about homelessness is it's not just one group of people. There are people who experience homelessness because they were in foster care and they were being abused and they left that situation. You have veterans who are dealing with a lot of PTSD, and that leads them into losing their lives and ending up on the streets. And so the root cause for each person is different, right? I think that the biggest thing, to answer your question, Christina, is that we have to stop othering people. We have to stop looking at other people who are going through suffering and creating stories about, oh, well, they deserve that, or they made really bad decisions, or whatever.
They did drugs, so
whatever.
They put themselves there, whatever it is. Yeah.
They don't. So we tend to push them away from the community instead of bringing them into community. And I think that that's the biggest shift.
Well said. Well, we said just a couple of seconds ago how, money doesn't necessarily solve the issue. With LA and the homelessness crisis, you have so much money unaccounted for. I would like to argue, I mean, it does require money to solve issues, but impactful use of the dollar, which is what Change Reaction does so incredibly well.
Right. Right. Well, I think the other thing, the best place for us to spend money is on prevention, is to go upstream, find out why this is happening, and start at that point. And that's really what the Change Reaction is doing. We prevent thousands of people a year from becoming homeless and experiencing that. And the whole approach with the Change Reaction is, in my career, which is about 33 years in the field, what I noticed is that everyone's climbing their proverbial mountain, whatever that is. Some people were born on the mountain. Some people were born on the summit of the mountain. A lot of people, it takes them a lifetime to get to the base of the mountain, and they start climbing. And most of the help is at the base. And it's when people fall off the mountain that everyone's there to say, hey, we're here to help. Well, all the trauma that happens when you fall off the mountain is so unnecessary. So our entire approach is, let's climb the mountain with these people and give them what they need when they need it at these critical inflection points in their lives, when a financial situation can become detrimental. And we know that many people in the city really struggle to make it. It's a hard city to make it in. So when we climb the mountain with people and with our partners and give them the financial resources they need to keep going, there's no need to get to the base of the mountain again. Let's help you keep climbing.
I mean, what you're talking about is really reimagining the system
exactly
as a whole. But you've also got to work with the system to get the aid to where it needs to be, to get it into the hands of people so that you can help them. Wade, this is a fascinating conversation. I want you to stick around because we've got our next guest coming up here who has worked with the Change Reaction and can talk a little bit about how to work within the system. We're talking about LA City Councilman John Lee. He's joining us for a bit. Can you stick around so we can talk with John and see about how you guys work together?
John's a great friend. I'm honored.
Amazing. This is a really cool conversation. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to continue, take a short break here. This is Change Reaction Radio, the Change Reaction Radio podcast on 790 KABC. It's Change Reaction Radio and the Change Reaction Radio podcast on 790 KABC. I'm Matt West. With me still is my co-host, Christina Pascucci. We're also joined by Wade Trimmer, president of the Change Reaction. We were just talking last segment about how the Change Reaction is kind of reimagining the system of giving, but also having to work within the system. So I love our next guest here to kind of help us talk a little bit more about that, shed a little more light on that. We're very excited and grateful to be joined by City Councilman John Lee. Welcome to Change Reaction Radio.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's good to have you here. Now, I know you've been working with the Change Reaction for a couple of years. It really came to my attention, Christina's attention, right after the fires, where you and the Change Reaction were able to bring some of the wildfire direct giving right to people in your community. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's when you're a council member, you tend to think sometimes a little provincially about your district, but when something like this, a catastrophe of this size happens, you think a little more globally around the city or even in the county. So, Greg has the Change Reaction and working with them in the past, I know how much they've been able to do in direct giving. So we reached out to them to try to help some of the people. People kind of were focused on the Palisades and, the $1 million homes and things like that. But, our focus always has been on what about the people who lost their jobs? What about those people who worked in the Real Inn restaurant or the markets there? How do we help those people? Because those people are now out of jobs and out of, facing life decisions that hopefully maybe the Change Reaction could help out a little bit. And, of course, we reached out to them and worked with them, and they've always been so incredibly willing to just help out the working person in the city.
You must work as a member of the city council with dozens of organizations.
Sure.
There's tons of charities all over Southern California. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes the relationship with Change Reaction maybe different from some of the other organizations that you partner with in your district?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I'm so happy that we're actually sort of shining a little more light on Change Reaction. Its founder, Greg Perlman, sometimes in the past, he's like, John, it's not about me. I want to make it about you. I want to make it about the people who are out there on the streets, making these changes, which is great for me because I'm in politics. I'll take credit whenever you want me to give it to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but it's important that I think that we're putting some attention on this because I think Greg's message is something that I think people need to hear about the importance of that direct giving. I work with a lot of nonprofits, as you said, but working with Change Reaction, I've never had someone who really wants to help so many people get to yes, right? In my job, having to say no is a common thing. I can't, when someone's coming to me with a certain type of problem that doesn't necessarily involve government, it's hard. Their stories affect you and they touch you, but having an organization like them to turn to and say, hey, this is their story. If they can just get over this one little hump, then they'll be fine. Otherwise, this one problem is going to drag them all the way back down. And how do we prevent that?
How do you balance that? Because I imagine as a city councilman in, the second largest city in the country, your bandwidth is spread thin. So how do you decide where to focus your attention first? And I'd love to hear more about the inner workings of government, I guess, during these fires and how you've balanced all of it during this time.
Sure. I mean, the fires, like I said, when they affected us, one of the things, 4 different major fires sort of touched my district, but we had no loss of any buildings or any people. The fire department did an amazing job. So when everything sort of settled down, I reached out to the council member, Tracy Park, whose obviously life has changed. I can't imagine waking up one day and someone telling me, oh, Granada Hills doesn't exist anymore. And that's what she was facing. Yeah, it was some of the texts I've gotten from her are some of the just most heart-wrenching texts, just realizing the magnitude of what was going on. So I think as legislators, I think the first thing is to try to take a look at what we need to put in place to solve the immediate problems. So not necessarily looking too much into the future, but what can we do now? What are the things that they need? What can we get them to help the situation now? I mean, these fires bring out the best and worst in people. We saw the best of people and everyone trying to donate supplies or donate money, things, but then we also had to look at the bad side, the people taking advantage of these situations,
right,
and focus on that as well. So there's a lot of different pieces that we had to sort of, pay attention to. And it's, as my kids and staff remind me, they say, this is the job you chose, so don't complain. Yeah.
How do you think, I'm curious, you mentioned, so much of her district being gone. How do you think that'll change the political landscape of Los Angeles moving forward?
I'm hopeful that public safety has been sort of my focus since I started, and focusing, trying to get the city to focus more on the core services of what do taxpayers expect when they pay their taxes? What do they expect from the city of Los Angeles? So that, and what are we doing in the city to promote the city so that we still have the economy as far as tourism coming and, everything with the Olympics coming, with the World Cup. We're going to be on the national stage. So, I mean, it's just been interesting because now I think there's been a bigger outcry for, hey, you need to focus on the things that keep us safe, and that's right up my alley. Those have always been things. We do a lot of great things in the city of Los Angeles, but I think the most important, there's 2. There's we need to keep our residents safe, and we have to pick up their trash. that's
right.
That's one thing that people notice right away when you when you don't do. But so there's obviously a lot of important things that we do, but I'm glad that the conversation has been around how do we increase public safety in the city.
It's so important. And I think a lot of people were shocked, especially the discussion around, was the fire department, was money taken away? Was it not taken away? There were different narratives around that. And What would your message be to Angelinos? What do you think they need to know on that front?
I think that most Angelinos understand we are faced, with a budget every year, right? And would it be safer to have a fire station on, every other corner in the street of Los Angeles? Of course, we have to make budgetary choices to run the city of Los Angeles, and certain choices were made. And again, I'm glad that there's been sort of an outcry to focus more on what keeps people safe, because that's exactly what I think we should be doing. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm hoping that this is an opportunity, what we call a legislative window.
Yes,
when you can do something today that you couldn't do yesterday.
You mentioned that government has a job and has a responsibility. I think we all agree with that. I think organizations like the Change Reaction can kind of fill in some gaps when, like you said, government can't really help and people are in need. But look, people also need to be able to do for themselves a little bit too. So, the question is in the aftermath of a thing, it's always a scramble. Everybody's trying to look for help. But there are things that people can do, maybe ahead of a disaster, to prepare, to take care of themselves, to make sure that they themselves are safe or can find safety or find resources. What kind of message do you have for folks after seeing something like this? What do you want people to know?
I heard too many stories of people, everyone thinks that, when you get evacuated that you have some time before. We had people rushing home from work. I've heard a couple stories of people who were like, when I got there, they said, you have 1 minute. If you want to go grab something, you have 1 minute to figure out what is important to you and bring it out, because we got to get you out of here.
Could you do it?
No.
I couldn't.
I mean, you know what? The Council District 12, that the area that I represent is sort of the north part of the city of Los Angeles, so we back against the hills. So we're no stranger to fire department. Fires in our area. I think one of the lessons I learned when I was evacuated from a fire was that, to have sort of a plan in place, because you find out some interesting things when you're evacuated house of what's important to you and what's important to your spouse.
Yeah, right.
I grabbed my brother's bat, the computer. She was grabbing Christmas ornaments.
Those are important.
It's good that to have a plan ready in place to know at a moment's notice you can be called to leave.
For sure. And then knowing where resources exist in case you get evacuated from a home too. I think that's also a thing. It's not just the plan of how would you clear out your house and what are the important papers and documents and things in your computer and your backup drive and all that good stuff, right? But where to go in the middle of that? Are those things always static, or are there certain things that people can rely on in the midst of an evacuation? Is that information readily available, or is it because things change, circumstances, locations of events happening, it's a little fluid? What do you want to tell people to know as part of having that plan of where to go?
Sure. I can't speak for every council district, but I know in my district, since we are no stranger to disasters, earthquakes, fires, that yes, I think my staff and I know. These last fires, we reported the office at 1 a.m., started looking at how do we contact Red Cross, how do we set up different rec and park centers, how do we get food and water. I think I've learned stuff from the first major fire I faced when I took office. Now I have an agreement with Amazon that I can walk in and take water and supplies to get it to some of our shelters. The first time around, I was too busy trying to explain what a council member was to,
right.
to some of the markets to try to get them to donate things. And so we were, things like that plans in place. But even things like we've thought of large animal evacuation. We have a big equestrian community in my district. Well, where do we get those horses to? Well, from last fire, we learned we needed to have a set place, Pierce College, different areas where we can take those large animals so that owners can feel a little bit, more comfortable that their animals are taken care of.
Nice work. I think the folks in the northern part of Los Angeles are very lucky to have you as their councilman on the city council there. You do a great job of keeping everybody informed, too. Where can folks follow you on social media and get those updates from you? Because they're actually kind of great.
Well, I appreciate that. The biggest thing I ask people is if you want to know what's going on in our district is to sign up at our newsletter every week. So you just go to c12.org. You can find that all there. there, and then it has a list of the different Instagram, Facebook pages that obviously people can sign up to get more immediate notice. But I hope that everyone signs up for our newsletter, because not only do you find out what's going on in the community, but important legislation that I think that they should be aware about.
Well, we appreciate you being here and
Certainly
keeping
do.
your eye on your community and doing all the things that you do, and keeping an eye out for them and keeping an eye out for ways that the Change Reaction can help in your community. So, Councilman John Lee, thank you for being here. We'll continue after a short break here. This is Change Reaction Radio and the Change Reaction Radio podcast on 790 KABC. We're rising and rolling on. It's Change Reaction Radio and the Change Reaction Radio podcast on 790 KABC. Matt West with Christina Pascucci. Wade Trimmer, president of the Change Reaction, still here. And
Great to be here.
Still here.
Just talking about our conversation with Councilman John Lee. I didn't realize you were so quiet during the segment, just letting him have a platform there, that you guys have actually been friends for a long time.
We've been friends for at least 10 years. And John, a big part of that is that we're both about the same thing, which is about serving the community. And John keeps it very simple, keeps it very pure, in the sense of, hey, I'm a community servant. The people elected me to serve them, and he takes that very seriously. And so John and I go way back. And now to work, with the Change Reaction and work with his team, because his team is all about that as well. The stories we get from them, it's so evident how much they love the people in their community and how much we've been able to help.
And how long has the Change Reaction been working with John Lee and his?
Probably been working with them for 4 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
if
what
not
else
longer.
is it that you think sets him apart from other council members? Because you said you've reached out to the other council members, and he just stands out.
He stands out, one, because we've approached other elected officials and said, how can we help your community? And there's been a lot of skepticism, because unfortunately that's how politics is, right? You scratch their back and you want something from them. That's not the case with us. We're not looking for anything back from anybody. What we're looking for is, how can we partner together to make Los Angeles stronger? How can we partner together to help the people, in your district? And John immediately responded to that.
Where do you find the most amount of resistance? Is it working with individuals? Is it working with government? Is it working with organizations? Like you mentioned that sort of cynicism or that skepticism, right? Because it is kind of odd, right? In a way, like we're here to help without any reciprocation whatsoever. So where does that resistance come up the most for you guys in your work?
The resistance is all around bureaucracy. And some organizations can become quasi-governmental, and you have to get through all of this red tape. And what's important for us is to never create red tape, to make it easy for people to make an impact. And part of my experience in the field is it was never the people that needed help that were the difficulty. It was always the systems you had to deal with and all the red tape you had to cut to get people to help. So fill out a 12-page application to get somebody into housing, and we'll get back to you in 3 months. Well, that's
3 months of somebody living on the streets or in their car.
More trauma, more.
Yeah.
So with us, it's quick, it's fast. We're committed to it being fast and strategic, but have no time for bureaucracy.
You guys are the antithesis of red tape and bureaucracy. And it almost makes you mad to think about you have an organization like the Change Reaction that is so good at the direct giving and maximizing impact. And yet there's still this criticism around it potentially, or skepticism, because it's almost too good to be true, because people are so used to being failed by these systems and these bureaucracies and philanthropies that maybe don't live up to what they claim they do. But that's not the Change Reaction, and I think that's why we're all sitting here and love it so much.
Where does that disappear? Like when does it click for people? Because if you've got them to get curious enough about what you do and how you do it and the work that's being done, when does it change? And when does that conversation open up?
We get a lot of that feedback around this must be too good to be true because it's too easy. And that saddens me because what it's telling you is that those folks are used to it being hard. So if it's not hard, it can't be true.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so
Right?
sad.
And so for us, I think when it really clicks, and this is what I told organizations early on when I was bringing organizations in is, I understand that. I'm just asking for a little bit of trust, and send us your first request for a client, and you'll see how true it is. You'll see that there's not red tape. You'll see how quickly we act. So I understand the skepticism, but give us a chance. And then they submit their first request through our portal, and it gets approved, and they call and they say, okay, this is real. Like, I just got to say yes to my client,
Right.
and the money came through, and everything's good. I said, great, so let's just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep going. Just bring us more and more people.
It's a breath of fresh air. It makes me think of, I was reflecting upon one of the people who you guys have helped, Elaine, who we talked about in the first episode, who was helped through the partner organization, A Sense of Home, and the Change Reaction paid for a few months' rent after she lost everything in the fire for her and her son. She describes calling 211, the government organization, to get a place to stay after the fire. And when she showed up, they said, okay, that'll be a $700 deposit. So even in the what was taken care of by the government, she thought there was still kind of like a hidden fee. There was the landmines waiting and, along the way. And that makes it very difficult in what's already an unbearable situation.
Absolutely. I think that, we really exist. We're not here to solve the world's problems.
Because you can't.
It
I mean,
can't.
it's too
Right?
enormous.
It's too massive.
Right? Okay.
But if we can make lives easier, if we can make people's lives easier, here's the thing, it's not about the money. The money obviously makes an impact that we give to people. It's what we put on the back of money, and what we put on the back of money is compassion, hope, love. We want people to be seen. We want them to know that they're cared for, that their story matters, that their lives matter, and there's a big difference there.
Hell yeah, there is. People always say they feel it with the Change Reaction. I mean, you see that over and over. Each person I've interviewed and spoken to who's been a recipient of the help of this organization says it restored their hope in humanity. I want to talk about, if it's okay to kind of switch over to what's happening in New Mexico, because that's a passion project for you and a microcosm of what can be done here in Los Angeles. Tell us more about that.
Sure. Santa Fe is my hometown, and I grew up there, and it's an incredibly beautiful place to be raised. And we've been thinking about for a long time with the Change Reaction, what does expansion look like? And we looked at different cities around the U.S., and Greg and I were talking one day, and he said, well, Santa Fe is a lot like L.A., because I've told him that. I said, it's a much smaller version of Los Angeles. You have a huge gap between the ultra-wealthy and people who are living in poverty. You have high home prices. You have all these issues that exist in L.A. exist in Santa Fe, but on a smaller scale. So the question is, in L.A., everything's at such a massive scale. I mean, literally, the population of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles is the entire population of the city of Santa Fe.
Wow.
80 to 85,000 people. So what we're doing in Santa Fe is taking financial resources, working with the community, which is a stunning community, and working with community leaders to say, we think that together with the right partnerships and the right kind of excitement and commitment to this, that we can radically change the face of your city, and then develop a playbook so we can take that to other cities throughout the United States.
And how has that effort been met in Santa Fe by, let's just go down the list, like first with organizations and city officials. Like how has that sort of invitation been met?
It's been amazing, truly, Matt. One, it helps that I'm from there. So I'm not sort of this LA guy coming in saying, hey, I want to help you solve your...
Right.
I
You're
grew
not
up
an
there. I
outsider.
understand I grew up around 9 Native American reservations. I grew up as a minority being, in that region. And so I understand the historic trauma. And so they've opened the doors because I'm a hometown guy. And working with the elected officials there, it's so easy to work with them because they just want I'm actually working with people I went to high school with.
Amazing.
Who are now on city council or in government, and it's amazing.
One of the things that struck me when we were talking with Greg, right, is how the work that the Change Reaction is doing and has been doing is meant to kind of be like a model, almost like a light. Like, hey, you can do this too, especially when it comes to connecting with the ultra wealthy and finding ways for people of means to be of support and make their money make sense, right? As opposed to just donating to a charitable organization and wondering what happens. This whole idea that the aid gets directly into the hands of people who need it is really what the Change Reaction is all about. I'm wondering how this experiment that's happening in Santa Fe is being met by some of the folks of means in that community, because there are quite a few of them.
There are, and that's just something that we're getting into. What the Change Reaction offers people that have means, because we have other families that have joined us because they've seen what we're doing.
Beautiful.
And they're sort of, hey, we want to be a part of it. And,
Beautiful.
And we invite you to come and talk to us if you're interested. The level of fulfillment is off the charts. And often in giving, it can fall flat. You can give, a $500,000 check to a big educational institution and not know exactly what impact that's having. For us, on a daily basis, you could literally be standing in line waiting for your coffee and help people within seconds and approve requests on your phone. So at the end of the day, people who are part of this movement, and it is a movement of generosity, they're feeling so fulfilled because they're seeing how just a little bit of money, our average grant size is just under $2,000. For just that small amount of money, you can solve something significant for people. And so it's that fulfillment. So in Santa Fe, I'm starting to talk to other people who have means to say, hey, give this a try. Sample it. See what you think about it. And they pretty quickly get addicted to it because it's so fulfilling.
How could you not? So what's a goal and vision for Santa Fe that you hope to bring to LA?
So the hope and vision for Santa Fe is to really build out an ecosystem and work really closely with community. I think there are a lot of lessons that Santa Fe can actually bring to Los Angeles as well around what does it actually look like to come together in a unified way in a community. And those are the types of conversations that we're having.
Great.
It's very cool, very exciting. Wade, I could talk to you for hours about the work that you're doing at the Change Reaction, but we've got to take a short break, but want to come back and talk to a family that the Change Reaction has been able to help, people who have actually been right on the receiving line of exactly what you're talking about, that direct aid that can make such a huge difference in people's lives. So we'll talk to those folks in just a couple of seconds. You are listening to Change Reaction Radio and the Change Reaction Radio podcast. Christina Pascucci, Matt West. It's 790 KABC. If you know what it's like to have somebody's back, then you know what we're all about. This is Change Reaction Radio, the Change Reaction Radio podcast, 790 KABC. It's been an amazing hour so far talking about the Change Reaction and how their model of direct giving creates real impact. And it always brings up the question. We've been talking about so much loss and so many ways that people can just be right on the precipice of not having anything. So what would you do if you lost everything? Think about it. Like, would you know how to find the resources you need? Our next guests have gone through so much and have been able to get amazing support from organizations like the Change Reaction as they try to put the pieces of their life back together. Take a listen.
I want y'all to enjoy your new Genesis SUVs. Come on. Come on. Come on.
This is taking something that was from ashes to something
Glorious.
something tangible.
And we're used to being the people who give and the people who help. The gratitude is so deep, I can't even express it.
With us now is Rasheed Ali and his wife, Gail Nichols Ali. Welcome to Change Reaction Radio.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey.
Great to have you here. Christina really was the one that put you on our radar. How did you guys all meet? Tell us that story.
One fateful day at A Sense of Home, one of our partner organizations, A Sense of Home, the Change Reaction has provided, I think, like 500 what they call home kits, which is essentially to furnish a home once fire survivors find somewhere to live post-fire. Because imagine losing everything and then now you have to find furniture. And, they supply everything from toiletries to the couch to the artwork on your wall. So I had the honor of meeting them at one of those events. You guys had met Glenn from the Change Reaction, who we've brought up in our first episode too, who's been instrumental in working with fire survivors on the ground. And it was such an honor to meet you guys. Everyone in the room that day, I was so touched by how palpable, like you guys were just so wise and you had this peaceful, calming energy despite everything you had been through. And it was just an honor to meet both of you.
Well, thank you. Likewise. It's always good to meet people who are givers, and your organization is all about giving. And I think one of the things that Gail and I have experienced as having lost everything in the fire was that people would come at us and approach us and say, "What can I do to help?" And normally our first reaction to that is, "Oh, we're okay." We kind of put some distance between us and them. Other people, they don't ask you. They come up to you and they say, "Here, you need this." Those are the people who really help. It's really difficult for people who went through what we went through to have to do the work. Because if you ask me, "What can I do for you?" Now you're asking me to do the work. You're asking me to formulate
It's another burden.
and process. And it's like another burden. Process, well, what do I need? But the people who really help, they just come at you. People like you and Glenn. Glenn came at me like, I'm going to give you this. And A Sense of Home was remarkable. We literally came back to this country and we turned the key on a place that our son had leased for a sight unseen. And then a few days later, it was filled with furniture and pictures. And it was amazing.
And then, as we just heard, there was a car giveaway.
Yes.
And that was through another person that the Change Reaction partnered with, Styx. And he's very influential, especially in Watts and the local community. And were you guys surprised when you showed up to that lot?
I was surprised and shocked because I had every intention of saying thank you, but no thank you. But I didn't know there was like a free car at the end of this. So
You thought it was a wellness event or something?
I thought it was a wellness event, which I was into, and that was cool because everything about that wellness event was about receiving and about being open and not blocking your blessings. And so I was into it because that's what I'm about. It's let's be open and let's receive our blessings as they come at us, especially since the disaster has happened. And so I was actually thinking, well, Glenn said it might be a lease. We don't really want a lease because we want to really kind of keep our finances low and slim as we try to rebuild our homes. We're going to be in for the long haul and debt, presumably. So the whole time we're thinking about how to nicely, graciously tell Glenn thank you, but like, no, thank you. So when they said, here's your car, I'm still thinking like, oh my gosh, are there papers I need to sign? Like, what are we going to do? Is there a credit check coming our way? So it was really amazing and a wonderful experience I'm still aghast. I mean, I go outside and look at the car and say, it's still here in the morning. Like no one's taking it away. It's still here.
Oh.
Incredible. Tell us a little bit about how, your experience since the fires, right, of trying to figure it out. I think so many people, thousands of people, were in the same kind of position. I just want to hear a little bit from your perspective, like, how did you go about it? What, all the conversations that you would have to say, like beyond the immediate, hey, we need to get clothing and shelter, like the basic needs. But the rebuilding part, I think, is what's fascinating here.
We were unfortunately, out of the country, celebrating our 43rd wedding anniversary in the Bahamas.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we were not physically here, but we were watching it unfold from a distance on television. And I think that we went totally into recovery mode. Like, what do we have to do when we get back? And we started making our lists. Like, okay, check, insurance company. Okay, well, what else do we need to do? And lots of our friends were emailing and texting us. Hey, there's this thing happening with, the Artist Foundation doing that, and there's this thing happening. And so we went totally into recovery. Like, okay, what do we need to fill out? What do we need to do? What do we have? We don't have Social Security cards anymore. Okay, but I know I've got one here in my cloud account. So let's check that. And so we totally went into survival.
It sounds like, though, that you really had some great friends and connections within your community that also helped kind of guide the way forward for you. How important has that been for you in trying to put things back together, as leaning on your community?
I found, because, we're on the private Facebook group, Altadena Community Group. It's only for Altadena people. And I say that because it is insular. And there has been information that we can share amongst each other. And because of that, it was a resource, and the Pasadena Now online newspaper, a resource. So there were resources. Oddly enough, on that same page, if you even go visit that page now, there are people who say, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. So there are people who are not plugged in. Maybe we benefited from not being in the country because, like she said, we were on survival mode every single morning. We were scouring the internet for organizations, Music Care, Sweet Relief, you name it. And we applied to everything.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's just a tribute to your resourcefulness. But I think it also underscores, too, for a lot of people, like, it's not just about connecting with your neighbors after the fact. It's not about creating community in the middle of a disaster. It's about creating and maintaining community during the good times so that if something happens, you've got a network. You've got people that you can lean on or go forward with, or maybe support yourself. And I want to go back to what you said too, Rasheed. It was the thing where people came to you and said, this is what you need, as opposed to what do you need and how can I help? How important is that for you as somebody on the receiving end to then kind of pay that forward, all the generosity and support that you've received from your community and from organizations like Change Reaction?
One of the first things that happened was a colleague of mine texted me and said, we're setting up a GoFundMe for you. I think that was the 8th, the afternoon of the 8th. And I said, what are you talking about? I was still disconnected from that reality. She said, trust me, I've been through a fire before. Trust me. And I said, okay. And she did her thing. And those are the types of people that Rasheed and I are talking about, those people who, they know what to do for you. They don't ask you. She didn't ask me, do you want me to do that? She just did it. And I think that how we've been kind of thinking about paying it forward is when we receive something and we're putting it out there on like the Altadena Buy Nothing page or the Survivors page, or we're trying to put it out there as well. We're trying to connect our community. The first thing we did was made a neighbor group text group so that we could all talk to each other and find out what's happening and share resources. And because we want our neighbors to rebuild. We like our neighbors. And Altadena is such a community where people would share oranges and even sandwiches. If you look at the history of our Buy Nothing page, they're that kind of a trusting community. So we wanted to make sure that we shared that.
Well, that's something that really struck me when I first met you both is in the midst of everything you've been going through and your family's going through. How many kids do you have?
Two
Two sons, right? Yeah, and they also were fire survivors. So you told me that because of what the Change Reaction has done for you, because of what happened with a sense of home where those needs and gaps were met, you were able to focus on paying it forward already. So as both artists, Rasheed, you're a very accomplished, internationally performing musician, and Gail, you had your photography studio that was destroyed in the fire as well. And you guys are working to help other artists like yourselves in the midst of all this.
Yeah. We met on that same community page, altadinamusicians.org, and we started a conversation with Brandon J. I did because I was so jealous of all of the musicians that were exchanging equipment. Like, these musicians have it together. So I thought, I texted him and I said, hey, I want to know how I can help, how I can bring back photography equipment to our community. And he said, why don't you start something? And I said, okay. I jumped on it. And so I started Altadena, photographers.org. And so we're trying to bring photography equipment back to the community.
Amazing. Where can people find altadinaphotographers.org? Is it that's the website?
Altadinaphotographers.org.
Perfect. Altadinaphotographers.org. Incredible.
And this morning someone challenged me and said, is it only for Altadena? And I said, well, you know what? Any fire survivor between the Palisades and Altadena, I'm willing to help everyone.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming in to Change Reaction Radio and sharing your story. Rasheed and Gail, we know we can find altadinaphotographers.org online. Rasheed, where can folks find your music if they want to get a sample of what you're all about?
1968 soulpower.com.
Incredible. Thank you so much for coming by and sharing your story. We want to stay in touch and see how things continue to develop. We're so glad that the Change Reaction has been able to be a small part of helping you guys rebuild your life. We're grateful to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
What an incredible hour of conversation and stories. And if you're not inspired by that to get connected with your neighbors and with your community, I don't know what I can do for you other than to invite you to listen to another episode. We'll be back next week. For Wade Trimmer, thank you, brother, for being here for this incredible hour. My co-host, Christina Pascucci.
It was fun.
This is Change Reaction Radio. You can find us online on Instagram at Change Reaction. You can find us on YouTube also at changereaction.org. You're listening to Change Reaction Radio, the Change Reaction Radio podcast. My name's Matt West, 790 KABC.